This one's tough, and I already discussed this one with some of you, with a couple of you, so if you've heard this answer before, let's let the other people play. Scientists, or a great number of scientists, are fond of saying that science is the only way you can ever know what's true. What's wrong with that statement? Any takers? What jumps out at you as being wrong with the statement, with the claim that science is the only way you can ever know what's true?
Well, I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but I would think that science still depends on human knowledge and what they find with things, so
that's true.
There are different viewpoints among scientists and everything.
Okay, so you say there are different viewpoints among scientists themselves because they approach science with different background knowledge. That's a legitimate claim, and that's really true. It's not quite what I'm looking for. Remember, I'm looking for a way in which this argument destroys itself. Yeah?
If the guy making the statement isn't a scientist, he really doesn't have a leg to stand on.
If the guy making a statement isn't a scientist, I don't really think that's it, especially since someone who's not a scientist per se can still understand scientific principles. A whole lot of science teachers out there are not scientists.
What's backing up?
But you're close. Yes, sir?
What's backing up the science?
What's backing up the science?
If you're saying science is the only way we know the truth, then what's backing up the science?
What's backing up what side?
The science itself.
Oh, are you talking about?
We're using science as an authority figure here.
Oh, I see what you're
What's
getting
backing
at.
up the science?
Actually, that is another legitimate claim. Science itself assumes certain things. Science itself assumes that the laws of mathematics are correct. It assumes the laws of logic are correct. It assumes that there's a certain consistency to the universe and so forth. There are a whole lot of things that we know to be true that cannot be proven scientifically. There's something more fundamental that I'm trying to get at, though, a way in which this statement disproves itself. And yes, Mark?
Well, it's just the phrase, the way it's phrased, that it's the only way you can know.
Mm-hmm.
It's limiting in and of itself because then you're making the presumption again
Yes.
that scientific method in and of itself is some absolute truth in a way.
Okay. So in other words, it's a limiting statement. It makes the assumption that it basically assumes itself to be true, assumes that science is the only way, right? That there's no real way to prove this. I'd like to take that a step further and show how this statement contradicts itself. I would point at this along very similar lines to what you just said. I'd point at this statement and ask, is this statement true? Is it true that science is the only way you can know what's true? And if so, what scientific method did you use to determine that? See what I mean? If we're going to play by this person's own game, anyone who says science is the only way to know what's true must be able to prove that using science. And I would ask, what scientific methodology would you use to determine that? See? Notice what just happened here, by the way. A whole lot of people raised a lot of very correct, very valid objections to this statement. Every single thing that people said was, I think, defensible. Or if not absolutely correct, then certainly very close to the truth. However, what I would aim for is a way to very quickly show that science itself is, to show that the statement itself cannot possibly be true because it contradicts itself. And I say that because if you go through some other route, then you give the person some wiggle room. Yes, Mark?
I was going to say the other way you can respond to this one is just from a historical perspective. Science is constantly revising itself anyway.
That's true.
So how can you even take a snapshot on a historical spectrum and trying to say all of a sudden now the understanding why those methods is right, and yet you could go 10 years down the line and all of a sudden they'll change it.
That's right. Science is sort of a self-correcting mechanism. And therefore, you know, what is scientifically claimed one day might not be claimed the next day. Again, though, the reason why I would choose to focus on the fact that this statement contradicts itself is because it's a very quick and clean way to respond. If you respond some other way, if you say, for example, that, well, science isn't perfect, science has made mistakes in times past, then the person who utters this claim is likely to come back by saying, yeah, but it's still the best tool we have. Or if you say that science has been erroneous in the past, they're likely to say, yes, but it keeps getting better and better as time goes on. You know, they still have some wiggle room. If you show that the statement itself cannot be true because it contradicts itself, all of a sudden you make that person more uncomfortable. That person has to question how he came to that conclusion. Notice what you're doing here. By doing that, you're doing a couple of things. One is it's like taking a surgical strike. In war, sometimes you want to take a surgical strike in order to undermine the opponent as quickly as possible. The difference here, of course, is that you want to do it gently. Another thing we're doing is we're exposing the fact that this person has not really thought the implications of his statement through, or really did not have any rational way of arriving at the statement. And so therefore, you're putting a pebble in that person's shoe. You're doing a little something to make that person more uncomfortable, such that every time he makes this claim, he's going to be reminded of the fact that, hey, you know what? I didn't really arrive at this statement through scientific means. Same thing if you go back to the previous claims. If someone says there is no absolute truth, and you prove that it, let's revisit that statement. When people say there is no absolute truth, how do Christians often respond? We try to point out things that are absolutely true. And the opponent may have a hard time accepting that because of all the baggage they have, because of the cultural worldview. A lot of people believe that, you know, different people have different opinions, therefore different people have their own truths. And so you can go down a whole lot of rabbit trails trying to argue that way. If you show that the statement contradicts itself, all of a sudden the person is faced with the fact that, hey, I didn't really arrive at this through any sort of rational means. It's something that I just kind of accepted to be true. If they're honest with themselves, at least, they'll come to that realization. And so once again, you're putting a pebble in their shoe, making them a little bit uncomfortable. And in my opinion, that's where we want them to be. We want them to be a little bit uncomfortable, to the point where they start to question what they believe. And we want to do that without embarrassing them.